We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and good afternoon. Certainly not good evening unless you're listening from another part of the world or sometime in the future where you're actually experiencing this podcast after the sun has gone down. In that case, good evening to you. My name is Robert Phoenix, and you are listening to the Friday FARcast. It is the 30th of September. I believe it's the last day of September. It's tomorrow the 31st. But anyway, we're nearing the end and getting ready to enter October, and one of the words we almost always associate with October is surprise. And October has a history of bringing events into our lives, especially at a collective level, that can be shocking at times, to say the least. Although I think last October we got through relatively unscathed. So I just want to give you kind of a sense as to what we're going to be doing today on the show, and hopefully we'll get through this show unscathed as well. In the first hour, in about 10 to 15 minutes, I'll be joined by Robert Bruce, who's actually a really interesting guy and a very accomplished energy worker and healer. And he's not only a well-known author. His book on Astral Projection has sold over 50,000 copies, but he's also a very accomplished presenter and teacher and researcher of the subtle realms. And he got into, and we're going to talk more about this and learn more about his fascinating story. He got into this when he was working with people that were blind and trying to understand how they experienced subtle energy, and this led him into a whole realm of very interesting discovery. And astral projection and working with energy are just two aspects of his work. In the second hour, we're going to be joined by Malcolm L. Brenner. And Malcolm, so I came across Malcolm in kind of an odd place. It was in a chat room, which was ostensibly dedicated to football and more sort of specifically the San Francisco 49ers. And, there's a lot of characters that hang out in this chat room. And one of the guys in the chat room posted a link to Malcolm's story, just kind of out of the blue. And I thought, and he does this every now and then, Mr. Non Sequitur. And so I saw this thing, and I'm like, this has either got to be a joke or it's one of the most interesting stories I've run across in years. And sort of the headline was that Malcolm had a 9-month relationship with a dolphin. And when I say relationship, I'm talking a physical relationship, one that encompassed the sexual realm, the emotional realm, and it's a really unusual story. He's written about it. His book is titled Wet Goddess, and we're going to talk to him in the second hour of the show and try to understand what it's like to have a dolphin as a lover. And so this has happened for the last three times I've done my show here. It's okay. I knew it was coming, so I prepared myself. I actually traveled into the future and saw this event taking place, so I wasn't stressed out about it. And I knew that Robert would actually be on in about 7 minutes, so it didn't stress me out. That'll be the last interruption in communication we'll have for the next 2 hours. I apologize, but we'll get back into the flow here. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened while I've been in New York. It's been kind of an interesting experience. I hear somebody on the 678 line. I don't think this is Robert, but they want to talk. Hello?
Yeah, hi, Robert. It's just me. Is your chat room open? Because I've tried every browser and I'm not getting in.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that.
Oh, dear. I thought I was crazy.
Chat room.
Okay. And another person left a note on your page saying she has no sound, so let people know to refresh or something, because they're probably going through the same stuff I was going through.
Well, for me, it's just a connection issue here. So,
okay.
But thanks for calling and reminding me that, Vaj. That's swell of you. How are you?
I'm good. Hope you're enjoying New York. I'm dying to hear this show today.
Okay, it's going to be a good one. Thanks for calling in. Speak soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so the chat room is open. Come on in. Tell your friends. This is going to be a really cool show. And if you can't listen live, tell them that they can always download the podcast. You can always download the podcast on my Blog Talk Radio page, and you can listen to not only this show, but I got a whole host of shows. I've got a lot of authors and a lot of speakers and a lot of really interesting people that have been a part of this program over the last year and a half. I mean, so let's just do a quick count of them. Let's see. We've got Jay Widener, easily my most popular show. It's got the most downloads. Andrew Harvey, Sacred Activism. I've got, who else? Dr. Bruce Lipton on Spontaneous Healing. Alexis K. Tyler on Sexuality. Let's see. Charles Osman on technology, all kinds of crazy nanotech and synthetic sentience. Alan Howarth on the mysteries of the Great Pyramid in Egypt as it relates to sound and the Western scale. I've got all kinds of great stuff. So the chat room is open. Come on in, people. There you go. Can I get a little love? There we go. There's Star Sirius. And you guys can hear me, right? Okay. You can hear me now? Give me a thumbs up in the chat room if you can hear me now. Yes. Going once, going twice. I'm assuming you can hear me now. Okay. We got this out of the way. There we go. There's Erica. Hi, Erica. All right. The gang is almost all here. So anyway, some interesting things have happened to me since I've been in New York. One of the first things I did when I went into Manhattan on what was that, Wednesday, I spent the afternoon with a group of teens. It was really kind of interesting. There's a Kelly, who's a listener of the show and a follower of the website. She invited me. She knew I was coming to New York, so she invited me to attend this after-school little gathering that she has with teenagers that go to the school that she's the librarian at. And she teaches an after-school program in astrology. So she invited me, and I got on the train and got off in Harlem, and I went even further uptown into the Bronx. And I hooked up with her and the girls at this pizza parlor. And it was actually very cool. It's a very cool experience working with kids. And she did a fantastic job teaching astrology. She had all of her teaching materials, and it was great. I mean, she had it really laid out. And the level of interest in the girls was phenomenal. I mean, we were there for almost 2 hours, and there was hardly any fidgeting going on. I mean, they were really into learning about this stuff, and Kelly did a fantastic job. So then Kelly and I went downtown, and then we went to Wall Street, and I spent I didn't spend enough time there. I'd like to get back down there while I'm still here, but I spent some time down in Wall Street, and I was down at Occupation Wall Street, and it's an amazing experience on a lot of different levels, and I wrote about it on my website. If you want to get kind of the astrological take on what I think is happening, you can go there and check it out. But the feeling and the vibe was very unique. It was, I was watching Jon Stewart last night, and he was kind of like, he was poking fun at it a little bit. Imagine that. And he was comparing it to Monroe. It has that kind of vibe. I mean, it has kind of a festival vibe. I'm not going to lie to you. But there's also something very important taking place there. It's because, number one, it's on the street and people are face-to-face. They're talking. They're not texting. They're not typing. They're not Skyping. It is face-to-face, person-to-person connection and experience. And it's really profound. And not everybody shares the same point of view. Not everybody shares the same perspective. Not everybody has the same political belief, but there they are, and they're talking amongst themselves and being incredibly respectful of one another. And I think everybody's learning a little bit about each other's belief systems and dispositions, and it's happening in a really cordial fashion. And so I'll give you, and you can go to my website, you can read what I wrote about the experience. And what you'll be able to see is at the bottom of my post, you'll be able to see a link to a live feed, which takes you to a camera that is covering the event, people that are showing up, people that have been there so far, besides myself, of course. Michael Moore, and it's funny watching Michael Moore, man. It's such a mixed bag when Michael Moore shows up, right? I mean, on the plus side, the event is going to get some coverage. On the negative side, it's Michael Moore. Okay, this is a guy who is, he's down for the common man. He's down. The guy is, look, I'm not saying that you can't have money and resources and be abundant and be wealthy, but Michael really downplays that in his life. Michael Moore has a lot of money. Michael Moore, I mean, technically, is part of the elite. Okay, from a socioeconomic standpoint, his bank account puts him into a whole nother tax bracket. Is he the upper 1%? No, of course not. But he is not somebody like an 18-year-old girl who I met, who's camping out there for the last 10 days, who's paying $10,000 for her first semester of college and student loans. Her first semester, by the time she's out of college, she'll probably be close to $100,000 in debt. And then she's got to go out and get a job and start to pay them off. She's already got, 2 feet in a very deep hole. So he's not that, right? And it's, look, I think it's challenging. I think the more money you have, the harder it is to stay in touch with people that are less advantaged. Is that a word, less advantaged? People just don't have as much. It's hard for people to maintain that sense of openness and that sense of this could be me. A few bad moves, a few egregious mistakes. A couple of body, organ failures or breakdowns. I mean, this really could be me. So it's harder, I believe, to stay in touch with suffering, and they've actually proven this. I mean, there's clinical tests that have shown that people that have a lot of money tend to care less about other people. It's just kind of the way it is. It insulates them. They begin to think about, protecting their assets. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we have to, find a unique balance between staying open and, being grateful and securing and even building on what we have. From an astrological standpoint, I think Chiron plays a huge role because Chiron is the wounded healer, and through our wound, we are able to stay in touch with suffering so that we're not in these ivory towers of remote feeling. And as a result, sort of remote socialization or our relationship to the social experience. So anyway, Michael Moore was down there yesterday. Cornell West was down there, and you saw that on the live feed. So you can go to my website, and you can actually go to the live feed and punch it in and check it out. Also, right next to the live feed is a kind of an ongoing scroll in text, and there's a lot happening there, and you can text your own thoughts and feelings. So I'll give you an example as to kind of what the breakdown of or how the whole thing sort of operates, right? So in the center of this square, right in the middle of Wall Street, occupational Wall Street, in the center of the square, there's kind of an area that's maybe about a 10 by 15 sort of squarish kind of rectangular space that's open, and the rest of that is surrounded by people. It's not a circle per se. It's kind of, again, it's more in the shape of a square, which is kind of interesting, right? It's rooted, it's grounded. It's Wall Street, Foursquare. So in there, you'll have people that are talking, and they'll be presenting something, or will be giving kind of a sermon on money or social responsibility or whatever that is. And they would say, I believe that it's in everybody's best interest to share their resources, no matter how much or how little they have. And then everybody around him would repeat that. And they would say, I believe that would be everybody's best interest to share their resources, no matter how much or how little they have. So everybody would say that, and that the message then goes out through the crowd. So here's how this happened. People were sharing their experience or their story or their speech or whatever, and what they would do is they would have these like agents provocateurs or CIA guys or whatever, right? Whoever was there. And they would shout them down. They would shout the speakers down off topic, or they were creating chaos. So what happened was that they figured out that if they could repeat what was being said, then it would take care of those guys. That they couldn't talk over the top, and that they were really on topic, right? And not only that, but it would carry throughout the entire crowd. So that's going on. That's going on pretty much all the time, right? Then kind of off to the side, they've got this whole drumming thing going on. They've got drummers that are kind of pounding out this rhythm the whole time. People come, people take breaks. It's an amazing kind of vibe, right? When they started off, they just had jars of peanut butter. Now they've got a full-blown kitchen. And it's a real event when the hot dog vendors show up. So there's about 4 or 5 hot dog carts all around there, right? So now it's become legitimate. And so this is actually a very interesting and I think very powerful moment for the United States of America, because the world has already been doing this. I mean, this has been going on for the last year and a half in places like Greece and Italy and Spain. This has all been happening there because they've been hit with austerity measures, and Greece is going to get another round of them. I mean, they're just literally hacking away at the Grecian economy and the Grecian infrastructure and their future, and they continue to do that. So one of the things that was crossing my mind as I was going through Robert Bruce's latest book, which is Energy Work, The Secrets of Healing and Spiritual Growth, was how could we incorporate this idea of being in a public place and broadcasting our voice, our feelings, and our intentions into the world, and how could we incorporate that with the use of subtle energy? And I thought it was a very interesting concept. It's sort of like the non-dual and the dual perspective, right? The non-dual being this, sort of formless ocean of consciousness, which is eternal, it's infinite, it's never changing. And then the dual being this, this dynamic that's worked out in this plane of existence, and we struggle and we push, we exert and we surrender. How do we bring those two worlds together? In a moment like that, maybe there's a way when we can apply these subtle energy techniques to a moment of public protest, or maybe not. But we'll find out. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring on the man who might be able to help us understand those dynamics even more. We're talking live from Australia. It's Robert Bruce. Hello, Robert.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, you can hear me. Great.
Yeah, I can hear you. Skype can be a little tinny, so I'm going to tell my listeners to kind of turn their volume up because you're a little on the low side, and I promise that when you speak, I'll be incredibly quiet here so we can get the most out of your volume. How are you today?
Great, thank you. Coming in through loud and clear. I've got a pile of telephones on my lap. I was trying to call you from multiple areas.
Well, I'm glad you were able to make the connection, and I want to thank you for taking time out for being here. We got a live audience. We got people in the chat room. I might go in there a little bit later and try to ask them a few questions or see if they have any questions for you. And, of course, this will be available on podcast. So, again, thanks for joining the show. And so I guess my first question to you, Robert, first of all, I got to say this. I went to your Wikipedia page. And on the first line, it says an English-born mystic. And I thought to myself, that's a great title, English-born mystic. So how does it feel to be an English-born mystic?
Well, I was 10 years old when my parents emigrated. So apart from 10 years in England, I was raised in Australia.
And where were you born in England?
I was born in Surrey, a little town called Pembrose.
Mm-hmm. And when you were a child, did you have any distinct impressions of subtle energy or any of the types of subtle fields that you ultimately began working with? I mean, when did that start to creep into your consciousness?
Well, that didn't creep in that way. I started having out-of-body experiences when I was about probably 4 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally just one night, I was about 4 years of age, best my memory can do, I started to buzz from head to toe, and I just buzzed out of my body. And I was moved through the house, feet first, like I was taking my bed with me, and moved down the stairs into the house, and that was my first OBE. And I had several that night. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing, a few months before, or maybe a week before, as best my memory can do, I had a series of experiences where I was paralyzed in bed, and I experienced this vibration. Now, it's not the same vibration you get with out-of-body experience. This was a higher-pitched, buzzing, humming type vibration that set my teeth on edge. You know the type of feeling you get when you bite into aluminum, foil, or paper?
Absolutely. Yep.
It kind of puts an uncomfortable shiver up and down your spine. Well, this was that type of vibration, and I would be paralyzed, and I had many experiences like that. Now, the last time I had this one before I had my first OB, which is shortly before it, I was scared, of course. I was only 4, little lad. And I managed to turn around, even though I was physically totally paralyzed, as happens when you're having OB-type experiences after projection. I now know I turned around in my second body, in my effort body. My physical body didn't actually move. But I turned around and looked, because above my head, when these experiences happened, there was a bright light coming from above my head just to the right, behind me. And I turned around and looked, and what I saw was there was a ball of light about the size of a basketball, which was humming with this intense bright light and fluctuating. And sitting next to that was a large ET, which looked like a human-sized praying mantis with a big triangular head and big eyes. And as I looked at it, I was a little lad, I was scared, but, you know, I was doing it.
This is your classic insectoid, sort of extraterrestrial.
Yeah, definitely an alien, an extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
And
okay.
And I looked at it, and within 2 seconds, it noticed I was looking at it, and it looked at me, and it touched the ball, and I blanked out. Now, I had dinner with Whitney Strieber and his wife Anne last year. Lovely people, and they've had a lot to do with ETs. And Anne explained that that was a typical grey, even though it had a body like a praying mantis. It had, like, you know, double-jointed little legs like an insect. Mm-hmm. And you know, that started, and now shortly after that, I had my first OBE. And jumping forward many, many years until a few years ago, I went to the Monroe Institute a year before I gave a 5-day workshop there. And one of their trainers there, Maureen Cordell, has become a dear friend of mine now, took me for a mini gateway for a few hours, and the first time I experienced hemisync, which is the binaural beat audio that the Monroe Institute produce. And as soon as I put the headphones on, I'd never used it before, I'd never had to. Mm-hmm. I recognized it. This was similar, not the same, but very similar, the way it made me feel, to what this ET was playing to me through that ball of light. And my whole body was like fizzing. And I can only, you know, logically, this ET altered me for some reason, somehow, using some kind of advanced hemisync type technology. And right. Then I started having OBEs. I had hundreds of OBEs, thousands of them, all through my younger years.
So, okay, so here you are. You're 4 years old. You're leaving your body. You're, you know, experiencing grays that are, you know, sort of mantis-like. Are you sharing this with your parents, your friends? I mean, what's going on in your head at that time? And was it accepted? Was it poo-pooed? I mean, what was happening then?
Well, I was 4. I mean, I told my mother, and Mother sort of patted me on the head and gave me a piece of cake. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
It's sort of normal. And over the years, and I had thousands of OBEs, and it was like really, really natural. And I tell my mum about that. My mother had spiritual interests. She was a spiritualist, and so she didn't put any pressure on me. She didn't say I'm mad or anything like that. So that was a blessing on its own, because I didn't get any preconceived notions, you know, that it was a really bad thing to do.
Right.
I always got the impression she never really believed me. You know, I had a big imagination, she would say, and give me more cake.
Give you more cake. But yeah, there you go.
Later, when I got over the weight problem.
Is there any history of alien contact in your family besides yourself?
Not at that time. If years later, when I was about probably about 31, which is a couple of decades back now, my mother and I were both. We used to visit once a week, and we continued this for like 15 years. We used to drive down to a friend of our place who's an old English medium called Selena Wickham, and she was about 80. And we went there every Thursday, and we'd socialise a little bit, and then we'd go into a development circle, just the 3 of us. Mm-hmm. And we'd sit there and do what spiritualists do. You know, you do a little bit of energy work and pray and do that. Now, we did that for many years, and it was lovely. Now, one night when I was about 31, now this was about a 35-minute drive from where we lived to Selena's house. Now, on the way home, I was about halfway home going through a wooded area, and it was about midnight, because we always left around 11, 12, because Selena was ancient. And I didn't check the time specifically, but it was usually around about 11, 12. And we're going through a heavily wooded area then, and ahead of us was a lot of trees on the side of the road. And this is important. I'm driving about a 1975 Chevy V8. They call it a Statesman over here. I don't know what they call it over there. Big, heavy automatic V8.
Right.
And I'm sitting on 55 miles per hour, and my foot's on the accelerator, and my window's up. Now, just ahead of us, about 200 yards ahead, a massive, brilliant light burst through the trees. And there were stark fingers of light, really intense, burning through the trees. And a big light source behind the trees was moving upwards because the fingers of light were moving. You know, you could tell it's moving up from behind the trees. Now, just as it crested the trees and I saw this big ball of light, you know, my mother next to me, you know, we were having an animated conversation, is nearly in my lap. I rolled the window down, electric window, and my head was out of the window to get a clearer view. Mm-hmm. And a split second later, you know, one thing or other, my foot came off the gas,
right?
You know, and I was coasting. I remember these details vividly. I've been through it 1,000 times. And a split second later, my window's up, my foot's back on the gas, I'm doing exactly 55 miles per hour.
Right.
There's no light in the road ahead. And my mother was sitting with her hands in her lap, looking straight ahead, and was quiet.
So you had a missing time experience.
Oh, yeah. My mother was never, ever quiet. You know, she's my best buddy. And
right.
We're always talking. And I saw it. It's like I just woke up. And I said to Mum, I said, did you see that? She said, what, dear? I said, that big light coming through the trees as we're driving around. She said, yes, dear. I said, well, what do you think happened? I don't know, dear. And went back to looking straight ahead.
Wow.
And my mother was never quiet like that. She was always very animated. Mm-hmm. Now, we got home. We were about probably 15 minutes from home at this stage here, and my stomach was feeling a bit uncomfortable. It was like rumbling a bit, and I thought, well, we had something to eat, you know, half an hour ago, just before we left.
Too much cake, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it was she gave a roast dinner of some kind, and she always spoiled me. And we got home, and Mum was really quiet, which was unusual for her. And we got inside the house, and it was 4:30 a.m. Uh-huh. And the sun was just about to come up. It was summertime in Australia. And the
you
sun
just left after midnight, just around midnight, and you got home at 4:30. We had approximately 4 hours missing. It was a 35-minute drive. Uh-huh. Now, I asked my mother many times after that, up until she died a few years ago. And she remembered the experience. I remember that. And she remembered the light, but she never wanted to talk about it. She never knew why. It made her feel uncomfortable. But, you know, as I say, that was one time we were physically abducted. Now, I've regressed myself being, you know, I do a lot of meditation and inner work. And the memories I call back involve a spherical spaceship about the size of a bus, I suppose you'd say, very quickly landed in the middle of the road. And something was controlling me. It was very, very calmly. I slowed down, went up the ramp into the ship, and the door closed behind me. And in like 10 seconds,
this thing was back behind the trees and then took us up into space. And it then very, very quickly docked with a very large ship. And we were taken into an area where there was a big open area with, like, can you imagine a cinema with luxury upholstered chairs, all focusing on the middle where there was a large ball of light. Remember the ball of light that started this like a basketball? Well, this was the size of a Volkswagen, like a big crystal in the middle. And there was hundreds of seats around it, and they were about half full. And my mother
was it other humans, or was it a mix of humans and ETs? What was the demographic for that?
There were some ETs, the smaller type greys, on the way up there I saw, and a couple of humans wearing, full body suits. But we didn't talk much because I was being controlled then. And when we got on the ship there, a man came up to me dressed in a whole body, like elastic cover suit, a bit like a wetsuit. And he had this headpiece on, which is like a cloth cap that went over the front and came down behind the ears, a bit like a Roman helmet, but made of cloth. An elderly gentleman. And he took me aside, took my hand and led me to the side. And I became conscious then. And they released their control of me. And we walked down the side of the ship, and he took me to some observation windows, and we were looking out at the Earth. And you could see the moon and the planet below. And he explained to me, he said, Robert, he said, we don't have long. He says, but what we're doing here now, he says, we're abducting people physically at the moment. He says, and we put them through some psychological training, which is what the light's for. And what we were doing, he says, we are programming trends in your population, trends for social reform, sexual equality, for the environment, and good things like that. And he said, we've been doing this for many, many years. He said, we also do a similar thing with astral bodies where you could say, he says, we take people when they astral project, which everybody does when they sleep, and we take their astral bodies up here and we put them through in a different type of, a similar sort of training, but in a different way. And the last thing he said to me, he said, what we're doing, he says, your civilization must go through a very narrow window. He described it to me like a letterbox opening. He said, in order to get to become a conscious civilization, he said, to make the first step. He says it's a very, very narrow window, and your civilization has been here many times before and failed. He says, and we're doing what we can to try and help this process. And he says, you must fit through this very narrow window, and then you will evolve to a much, much higher level of civilization. He says, and at that point there, we walked back to the room where my mother was sitting there gazing at the ball of light with a couple of hundred other people. And after his explanation, which is much lengthier than that, I fully agreed with him. And I said, okay, where's my seat? And he just gestured, and I sat down and looked at the light, and that's the last thing I remember.
So let me ask you a question. Did you have free will in this? I mean, could you have said, hey, this is really great, but I'd like to get back to my car and go home. David Letterman's going to be on in 15 minutes. I mean, did you have free will in that moment, or what was that like for you? Did you have any choice at all in the matter?
I didn't have any choice on the way up there because I was controlled. It's a bit like being possessed.
Right.
I've been there. It's like not as nasty, but I was very controlled. It was like there was another mind inside my mind controlling me. I was pushed aside, and this part, it felt like me, but it was something else, and I knew exactly what to do, drove up, slowed down, aimed for, drove up the ramps, stopped at the right time, and got into the little shed and then up to the big one. But after he took my hand, once he took my hand, I was going to sit down next to my mother.
Right.
Once he took my hand, I woke up, I became conscious, and then I had free will.
I see. So you had free will, and could you have made a choice, say, hey, you know what, I'm not really open to being tested today. Can we do this another time? Would they have respected that at that point?
I think he would have done. He seemed to be very kind. He had a very kind energy about him. And I think he would have followed my wishes. But I was very interested. I said, what's happening? What are we doing here? I asked the questions. His answers were so astute and interesting, and they made so much sense to me that there's no way in the world I would have missed that chance to talk with this man and have an explanation given to me.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Did you have a sense that you'd been there before?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I couldn't say why.
Right. Well, this is all very fascinating. The one thing that really jumps out at me is the description that he gave you about a very narrow window in order to sort of pass through to this next level. It reminds me of sort of the parable of threading the eye of the needle that Jesus talked about, right? That we'd have to put our consciousness. It'd be that narrow, and yet on the other side of that would be unlimited space. It's fascinating. So let's talk about your healing work, which is really kind of the bulk of ostensibly why you're here. Although this is really fascinating stuff, and I don't think that they're necessarily separate or mutually exclusive. I just want to ask you one more question before we get into that. You talked about going to the Monroe Institute, and you had a very similar experience using HemiSync as you did with your first kind of initiation in some ways with the out-of-body experience. Do you think that Robert Monroe was working with extraterrestrials to bring this technology through?
I think that's very likely.
Yeah. I'd never thought about it. I'd read a number of Monroe's books, and I've only had cursory experiences with the HemiSync stuff. But as you talked about it, all of a sudden it popped into my brain that maybe he was getting his information from, some other sources. Well,
I definitely think that. I know quite a bit about Robert Monroe. I actually met him after he died. When I did a 5-day workshop at the Monroe Institute along with Moore and Cordell. I slept in, the workshop was done at the Robert Monroe retreat, which was his personal home at the time, and I slept in his bed, in his room.
Uh-huh.
And the first night I was there, Robert Monroe appeared to me. And I looked at him. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but you familiar with the character, Star Wars character Yoda?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Yoda is Robert Monroe because while they were making the film in the early stages, one of George Lucas's artists attended a workshop at the Monroe Institute.
Uh-huh. And so he modeled Yoda on Robert Monroe.
Yeah, Robert Monroe had a very craggy, very interesting face, and he sketched him extensively, during workshop sessions, and eventually Robert Monroe, his face appeared on Yoda. You take away the funny hair and that is Robert Monroe. If you look at a picture of him, in his latter years, you'll see it's Robert Monroe. And this is not a topic to ever bring up around Robert Monroe, apparently. He did not like it. He was very unhappy about it. But anyway, besides that, when I first saw him, the image that built up in the room, I'm clairvoyant, was of Yoda. And I looked at him, and knowing the story, I said, Robert Monroe, and a big tick appeared in midair. and he transformed into Robert Monroe. And I said, okay, Robert. I said, nice to meet you. I said, what do you think of the workshop so far? And he smiled at me and went, tick. You liked it, yeah. I had a lot of other contacts with him during the week of the workshop. His energy is very strong there in the Institute, at the Monroe Institute. And it was like, yeah, I quite like the man. And I think he's, I told him at the end there, I said, you seem to have mellowed a bit since you died, Robert, and a big tick appeared, saying yes.
That's
wild. A lot.
Wow. Interesting story. Okay, so let's try to get as close to present time as possible. When did you start to figure out that you had some faculties with this, and you wanted to begin to really explore this and create your own system, which goes by the way of new, by the way. And when did all this start to really take hold for you, Robert?
Well, the short version is, when I got to about 20, I'd had thousands of OBEs and clairvoyant experiences. My mother got more interested in spiritualism, and I was exposed to a lot of books by this, and I was a real bookworm in those days. I read them, and I started to follow the books. I think the first book I ever followed, practical-wise, was it's called The Third Eye by Lobsang Rampa.
Right.
And the techniques in there are actually pretty good. Cut a long story short, jump forward many, many years. When I was about 40 years of age, just before 39 years of age, I was doing an enormous amount of meditation. And I'd raised my Kundalini and done a lot of really incredible things. And one evening, I was sitting by the fire in the house alone, and I was just playing with my energy. And I had an idea that if you had major chakras, energy centers in your body, you'd also have secondary ones, minor ones. And I theorized that you'd have them in the joints.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. And I was just feeling around. I theorized, okay, the big toes would be a good place to start. So I'm feeling around my right big toe, and I'm just sort of looking at it and sort of trying to get an impression of it. And what I started doing, I started connecting with my tactile senses with my big toe, and I started moving it backwards and forwards, up and down, and moving my tactile sense through it, my point of body awareness through it, and without knowing it. And in a few seconds, my toes started to buzz and vibrate and tingle. And I thought, whoa, what's happening here? So I played around with some more, and before I know it, all my other toes were buzzing, and then on both feet. And, keep going for like an hour. I started moving it through my legs, and I had my whole body and joints and all my chakras buzzing. And I discovered a new way of stimulating the energy body, which is using your tactile senses. Now, cut a long story very, very short, I realized later what I discovered here is a missing link. And this is when a couple of hundred years ago, a lot of Eastern knowledge was brought to the West, including knowledge on energy work and, spiritual metaphysical techniques. The only word we had in the English language, translating often from Sanskrit, was to describe how to move energy were words relating to visualization. And so everything became visualization, and visualize this, see this, and see that. Now, what I discovered, the missing link between, the missing link that actually makes energy work, which allows you to stimulate your energy body to move energy through your energy body, are your tactile senses, a sense of touch, kinesthetic awareness. And once I discovered that, in a few short months, I worked through my energy body, a quarter inch at a time, and discovered all the little pathways and every little secondary chakra and all the little connecting bits and doobobs and chakras and how it all worked. And I mapped it all out by working. I'd read very, very little on this. at the time. There's very little practical stuff around about this, particularly at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a very, very short time, I mapped it out, and I started, developing my own system. This is my work, what I'm doing. And so I started sharing on the internet, and eventually I published some articles on the internet. This is about 1994, 1995, on energy work and astral projection.
And then in 1999, your first book, Astral Dynamics, came out, and it's been very successful. It's sold over 50,000 copies, and I'm sure it's still in demand, and really, puts you squarely on the map in terms of this field and this area of awareness. I was reading your latest book, and the book that what I have here, which was sent to me by your authors, which is Energy Work: The Secrets of Healing and Spiritual Growth, which actually came out in 2007. You've got some other books in 2011, The Practical Psychic Self-Defense Handbook and Evolution: What You Need to Know About to Be Successful Spiritualities. But this is the book that I've been focusing on. And there's a story in there where you work with a young man, I guess this was about, 20 years ago, who was having a hard time seeing. And you were able to work with him, and he's actually able to regain his sight, go to the 20/20 level. It's a fascinating story. Can you recount that for the people that are listening to the show?
Oh, that's Jose. It's spelled with a J, but it's pronounced Jose. Jose. It's Spanish. Yeah, mm-hmm. That was one of my first healing clients. Around that time, I also opened up a couple of healing centers, and I worked long and hard at healing. It was my first love. Jose was a young guy, he was about 12 years old, and we had a healing center, my mother and I, in our home. And he turned up one day with his mother, and he had big, thick, shock, glasses about half an inch thick. And he was always, peering through them. He could hardly see. And he had a congenital eye defect. And he was, going steadily blind. And they said by the time he was like 15, he'd be completely blind. And I worked with him, and his mother was nice. She didn't speak much English, but Jose spoke good English. He came probably about 4 or 5 times once a week, and I would talk to him, and he said to me a couple of times, he says, I know my eyesight's going to come back. He says, I can feel it. He said, every time I come here, it gets a little bit better. And then after about 5 visits, of course, I encouraged him. And I'm doing my best. The healing flowed really wonderfully. And then I got a phone call from his mother saying, oh, please, you've got to help. I said, what's the matter? She says, Jose has thrown away his glasses and won't tell us where they are. He said he doesn't need them anymore, but poor Jose needs his glasses. And they came the next day, and Jose didn't have his glasses on. He says, I can't see with my glasses on anymore. He said, it's all blurry. I can see really well without them, but Mum won't believe me. And she took him to the eye specialist that day, and they came back for the second healing center we had later that week, and with the report from the eye doctor, and Jose was diagnosed with 20/20 vision. The doctors could not understand. They think there must have been a mistake made somewhere, because he suddenly had perfect vision and was not congenitally going blind anymore. And I often think about him. I saw him about 10 years later, maybe more, 15 years later, and he was married, had a family of his own, and I looked at him, and he touched his eyes and went thumbs up, still had perfect vision. And he works as an electrician, an electronics technician.
Where you have to use your eyes in very specific and focused fashion on a daily basis, right?
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah. I mean, you think about going blind yourself, it's a big chunk out of your life.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk to you briefly, because we've only got about 10 minutes left before I have to transition to the second phase of the show. But I wanted to talk to you briefly about psychic self-defense and in your encounters with what we would call dark energies out in the world. Okay, and I wanted to ask you sort of the validity of these dark energies, and maybe you could share a personal experience or two. And how do we deal with them? I mean, certainly we have dark energy that we encounter on a personal level with other people, but then there's sort of this ambient, out-of-body dissociative dark energy, which is also, in our spaces as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe share an experience and maybe give people one or two kind of practical pieces on how they can deal with that?
Okay, well, negative forces exist. I was working as a healer very, very active for many, many years, and I'd often come across people that had, they told me they had, dark energies, possessing entities, and various things making their life terrible. And even though I was supportive and, I took them at face value, I never really got it because I'd always been, I think, very, very protected from these things. And then one day, I'm giving healing to a 5-year-old boy who had a horrific problem, a demonic possession problem. It seemed like a lot of phenomena around him. And I'd given him healing many, many times. And one night, an exasperation, it just popped into my head, a line out of the movie The Exorcist when the priest says, "Take me and leave the child." And I said it in my head. And I said it sincerely, "Take me and leave the child," a little 5-year-old boy.
Right.
And it did, instantly. And I was paralyzed, I could say it, tortured for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I collapsed. And I got up after that, and I felt okay. But over the coming weeks, I started losing control of my body one hand at a time, a little bit. It's almost like something was trying to drive me. And this got worse and worse to the point where I moved into a house on my own. I didn't trust myself to drive. And this was over a period of several weeks. And what was happening, I was becoming demonically possessed. And this thing was really evil. It was the same being that was with the child, which was a demon. I saw it very clearly. It looked very much like Gollum out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. But
with little horns about an inch long in its head. Now, to cut a long story short, I was led for a huge saga where I had no choice but to connect with my higher self and embrace the greater spiritual reality very, very firmly. And I was led through signs and omens to a place in the Australian wilderness where I was taken to a very special place, which I spent 5 days sleeping there. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was sleeping right over the top of an underground stream of water, quite close to the surface. And after 5 days, this released me. Quite a traumatic episode, but that alone released me. And years later, I'm cutting a very long story short here, but years later, I realised that it was the running water that did the trick. So to give you a very quick practical tips here, negative entities, demonic entities of any type cannot cross running water. They are extremely damaged by running water, whether you cross running water, a stream, an underground water main, or whether you get in the shower. My first line of defense, if you feel an attack happening, cross running water, get in the shower. It literally washes it off.
Wow, that's a very simple technique. But the shower's an amazing experience. You take a shower, you feel different when you come out of the shower. It's very simple, but it's very transformative.
Well, what's happening very, very quickly over the entire surface of the earth, the land and the water, the mountains, your house, inside and out, all structures. There are about 7,000 lightning strikes on this planet per minute, I think. It's an enormous number. And you have a perpetually dissipating electrical field which covers the entire surface of the Earth. And these things live inside of that energy field. There's a corresponding field up in the stratosphere as well, which is connected through the lightning strikes. And if you can expose a negative entity in that field to strong grounding, like steel driven into the ground, it has a really good electrical earthing, or
right.
to running water, or get in the shower, you will force it to Earth. And I think it is drawn down into the planet's electrical system and back out through one of the poles and back into the stratosphere again. You basically demanifest it. And it makes a lot of sense if you look at how these things work. Electrical phenomena, and particularly the electrical earthing phenomena, is a very, very big deal with these things. You have a huge impact.
Fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating. What role would, I'm sure you're familiar with orgone, what role would orgone play in something like that, especially like the cloud busters, the orgone cannons, or the kind of the larger orgonic structures in terms of dealing with those negative energies?
I've had some success using orgone devices with people that are willing to try it. The big problem with going forward in these experiments, of course, you need live, ongoing cases to experiment with, which is all my work's based on live, hands-on work. Most of the people I come across, it's like they find it difficult to get into the orgone energy thing and actually use it and do experiments with it. So I have to actually, I've done some, I have to actually set them up and bring a person to a place where I've got it set up. So the results so far are very promising.
Well, that's good. I mean, we've had Carol Croft on the show, and we've explored the dynamics of orgone pretty thoroughly, and I'm utterly fascinated by orgone and tapping into the universal energy grid and field. Your book, the one that I've been reading, Energy Work, I have to tell you, it's incredibly practical. I mean, there are just really, lucid, hands-on techniques in terms of how to work with energy. This is not something theoretical. This is not something where you're talking about concepts. This is really practical stuff, and it's very, very, very helpful. I mean, I've been playing with energy and working with energy in my own way for since my 20s, but there's some really great techniques in here. What's some of the feedback you've gotten from the book?
The feedback from the Energy Work system, and particularly the book Energy Work, is absolutely tremendous. I mean, I'll do live workshops on that. I can teach anybody to feel energy in their own body by doing it themselves in like 3 minutes. That's how long it takes to connect you with your kinesthetic senses to move energy. You literally rub your hands together, feel the sensation you've made, and move that feeling back and forwards, fingertips to wrists. Just move the feel through your hands, and your hands will start buzzing and tingling and prickling. And that connects you with the energy. The fundamental technique of moving energy. It's a tremendous impact. I'm also bringing out video-based programs as another way to communicate with people, as opposed to doing limited live workshops around the world. Video them, and everybody has access to them. If you go to astralbob.com, you'll find we have a lot of video and stuff there, and a lot of free stuff. Video talks and techniques and things like that at astralbob.com.
Astralblog.com?
Astralbob, as in Robert. Bob.
Astralthought. Okay, astralthought.com. Okay, great. Astralthought.com. Well, Robert, this has been tremendous, and I really want to thank you for coming on the show, and I'd love to have you back on again sometime. I felt like we were just scratching the surface of your world. Would you be open to coming back on the show at some point in time in the future?
I would absolutely love to. Anytime.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking time out of your night. I think it's night over there in Australia, and being with us. And have a wonderful weekend. And we'll either see you on the Astral, or we'll see you back on here in the in the virtual planes.
My pleasure, and I will see you in the astral soon.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye now. That was Robert Bruce, and that was a great 60, well, it was almost 60 minutes. He got on a little bit late. And my next guest, Malcolm L. Brenner, is on hold. Malcolm, I know you're listening, so hang in there, okay? I just want to do a little business, and I want to get you. I apologize for not reaching out to you, but Robert kind of ran over a little bit, and I was going to do the phone call thing. But you're here now. I see you, so don't go away, okay? We're going to bring Malcolm L. Brenner on in about a minute or so, and we're going to talk about his book. We're going to transition from working with energy and subtle fields and the ET connection, which apparently Robert had in a big, big way, and then we're going to transition into Malcolm's very interesting story. And I promise I'm going to try to stay away from as many puns as possible and respect his experience, because I think it's a fascinating one and one that a lot of people haven't shared. This is Robert Phoenix. You're listening to the Friday FARcast. It's a great show today. It's the 30th of September. Big shout out to the chat room. I'm sorry to get in during that last interview, but I'm going to try to type a little bit and peep in there while Malcolm is on. See, this is when an assistant producer can really come in handy. But Janet's in there. She holds down the fort. She does a really good job of that. So props to Janet and everybody else there. And if you know what,